hot liquid flew through the air. In an instant, it spilled over the red uniform, spreading dark spots on the woolen fabric. "Oh, sorry," a guy in a branded jacket exclaimed loudly, holding his phone at eye level. "Dude, you can't even move, right?" The guard did not react. He just stood there, unblinking. His tall bear cap seemed to be part of an ancient ritual, and his face seemed to be carved out of stone. But the people around him had changed. A woman next to me shrank back and whispered, the horror. Someone in the crowd pulled out a phone. Someone swallowed nervously. "Do it again," the provocateur's friends encouraged him. He smiled, feeling that he was in control of the situation. He did not know the main thing. The guardsman's static stance hid his military training, thousands of hours of discipline, and one simple truth: the body may be immobile, but duty never is. And when the guy took a step closer, the world suddenly changed. The guard took a step too. London. A cloudy day near the tower. The street is still wet after the morning rain, but this does not stop tourists. They take pictures, laugh, and look at the guardsmen, who stand like statues, as if nothing in the world can shake them. However, among the crowd there are those who came not just to watch. "Look, he doesn't even blink," laughed a skinny guy in an expensive jacket, pulling out his phone. His name was Zach. He was 22 years old, a blogger, used to provoke, to look for the boundaries. And today he decided to test a man who was sworn to secrecy and had no right to react. "Zach, come on, can we move on?" his friend Max muttered. "You know these guys aren't clowns." Zach ignored him. His camera was already rolling. "Okay, gentlemen, let's see if this guy is a real soldier," he said mockingly to the camera. "If he's just an actor in a uniform, hell break. If not, well, then he is a real professional." He took a paper cup full of hot latte from his hand. "Zach." Max nervously squeezed his shoulders. "Relax, it's just a game." And he threw. The drink flew through the air, splashing on his red uniform. Brown stains spread across the woolen fabric, and steam rose into the cold air. There was silence for a second. Zach laughed. "Oh, bro, I didn't do it on purpose." "But you still can't answer, can you?" The guard stood motionless. Zach took a step closer, pointing the camera directly at the soldier's face. "Dude, at least blink, huh? Give people some content." Max was already stepping back, feeling that this had gone too far. The tourists around him started whispering, and then something changed. The guard took a step forward. His heels hit the pavement loudly, echoing. A dark rifle but appeared in his hand. Zach abruptly backed away. "Relax, bro, we're just kidding." The guardsman raised his rifle and, strictly following protocol, shouted loudly and sharply, "Get away from the guard." Zach did not move. He had never seen anyone he provoked act like that. He hadn't expected the man who had been a motionless statue a minute ago to suddenly show a threatening presence. The crowd felt it too. People stopped laughing, and their phones slowly went down. The guard took another step. There was no anger or doubt in his movement, only duty. Zach stepped back. His confidence was gone. "Hey man, we're just..." His voice became thinner, more uncertain. The guardsman leaned forward a little and spoke in a flat, cold voice. "This is an assault on a member of the armed forces." Zach suddenly realized that if this man reported the incident, he would be in real trouble. Zach felt his stomach clench. This no longer seemed like fun blog content. The guardsman stood right in front of him, not like a silent mannequin for a photo, but like a real military man. His face was calm, but his eyes showed cold confidence. "This is an attack on a soldier," he repeated. Zach took a step back. "Bro, I didn't. It's just..." He swallowed his saliva, his voice treacherously shaking. The people around him were no longer making videos for TikTok. They looked at him as if he had crossed a line that everyone knew about but never dared to cross. "Step back now," another commanding voice said. Zach turned his head. Two policemen were quickly approaching them. A man and a woman, both in navy blue uniforms, with radios on their shoulders and handcuffs on their belts. Shit, he panicked. Max backed away even further. "This is not funny, Zach." "Sir, keep your hands where we can see them." The policewoman came closer, her face calm but her eyes hard. "You just poured hot liquid on an off-duty soldier." "It's just coffee," Zach blurted out. "That's assault," said the second officer, a large man with a short beard, and obstructing the performance of Royal Guard duties. Zach was still trying to hold the phone in his hand, but his fingers were suddenly damp with sweat. This was supposed to be a video that would get millions of views. And now he stood here, knowing that he could actually get hit by a police car. I didn't know it could move, he blurted out. I thought they just, well. The policeman tilted his head slightly. Dummies? Zach felt the heat rise to his face. Sir, the female policeman interrupted. Do you have any identification? He reached into his pocket, but his hand trembled. I didn't. I was just joking. Your papers, she repeated. Zach realized that the joke was over. The crowd was silent, watching what was happening. Some whispered, others just stared with an expression that meant one thing. It was his fault. The guardsman stood straight. He did not speak anymore. He had already done everything he had to do. Zach pulled out his documents and the policeman took them, quickly checking something on his radio. According to British law, he began calmly, it is a criminal offense to deliberately obstruct the work of the guard. If we consider this an assault, the case can be passed on. Zach's jaw clenched. Are you serious? Over a fucking coffee? The cops didn't answer right away. Do you know that these guys are trained in combat? The woman asked. Zach looked down. Max turned away, as if he was ashamed to be around him. The policeman paused, then looked at the guardsman. Do you want to file a formal complaint? The policeman held his gaze on Zaki for a second. No one knew what he was thinking right now. No, he answered briefly. Zach exhaled sharply. But this man must leave the premises, the guard added in a steady voice. You heard the man, sir, the policeman said. Leave and don't come back. Zach realized he was saved. He didn't argue anymore. He just turned and walked away, not even looking at the camera, which was still on. Behind him, people went back to their usual routine, but now they looked at the guard differently. And Zach knew that this day would change him. Zach walked quickly, not looking back. His heart was pounding and his mind was racing. He didn't know what was worse, the fact that he could actually be arrested, or the fact that he looked like an idiot in front of 100 people. What a moron, he heard someone say behind him. People looked at him like he was garbage. No smiles, no looks of approval, just disappointment and disgust. Zach, you're a fucking asshole, Max muttered, walking beside him. You didn't say anything. He snapped, even though he knew it was pointless. Because I thought you weren't that stupid. Zach gritted his teeth. His mind was still replaying the moment when the guardsman stepped forward, when his rifle slid off his shoulder with a slight movement, when he erased all his confidence with one calm look. He was not a mannequin. He was not some actor in a suit. Zach felt something heavy settle in his chest. He was ashamed. For the first time in a long time. What are you going to do now? Max asked. I'm going to delete the video, Zach muttered. Max looked at him in surprise. Are you serious? Zach didn't answer. He just took out his phone. He opened the camera and entered the gallery. The video he wanted to upload to TikTok was there. He pressed delete. It was an unnecessary act, he said quietly. Max just nodded. Zach threw a quick glance back. The police had already left, and the guard had returned to his position as if nothing had happened. But Zach knew it had. For him, Zach and Max walked down the street in silence until the noise of the crowd dissolved behind them. The sun broke through the clouds for a moment. But for Zach, the day remained gray. What now? Max finally broke the silence. Zach shrugged his shoulders. We forget it. Forget it. Max snorted. You think it's going to go away on its own? Zach stopped and turned around. What am I supposed to do? Go back there and say, oh, I'm sorry, I was being an asshole? Max replied calmly. Zach clenched his fists. This is ridiculous. He doesn't care. Then why are you so angry? Zach didn't answer. He didn't know why he couldn't get it out of his head. When he looked at that guard, he saw more than just a man in uniform. He saw a calmness, a cool self-control that he had never had. The guardsman was not even offended. He did not curse him, did not get angry. He simply returned to his post and continued to stand. That was what was so disconcerting. He was made a fool of, not with words, but with silence. Well, it's your business, Max said, moving on. But Zach didn't follow him. He looked once more toward the tower, and for the first time in years, he felt that he couldn't just brush it off. Something in him had changed. The next morning, Zach stood in front of the tower again. But this time, everything was different. Yesterday's audacity was gone. So was yesterday's self-confidence. People around him were still taking pictures of the guards. Children were pulling their parents' hands. Tourists were laughing. discussing how these mannequin soldiers could stand still for hours. Zach watched in silence. The same guardsman stood at his post. His uniform was clean, as if yesterday's coffee stain had never happened. The high bear cap made him look like part of a monument, a symbol, something more than just a man in uniform. And although his face remained motionless, Zach felt that this man remembered him, remembered what he had done. Zach took a deep breath. He didn't know what he was expecting. That this guard would somehow give him a sign? That he would blink or give a subtle nod? But he didn't have to do that. Yesterday, Zach crossed the line. And he realized it only when he saw that his stupid jokes caused neither aggression nor an emotional outburst. Only cold, military discipline, which in itself was a response. And this answer made him think. He was ashamed. And although he could not turn back the clock, he could do the only thing left. Admit his mistake. Zach looked down, picked up what he had brought, and took a few steps forward. In his hands he held a small paper cup. Black coffee. No milk. No sugar. He put it right in front of the guard. The people around him didn't pay attention. It didn't matter to them. But for Zach, it was an important gesture. He wanted to say something, to explain himself, to apologize in a long, lengthy speech. But the words suddenly seemed unnecessary. So he said only one thing. "I'm sorry." No response. Not a single gesture. The guard stood there, as a guard should. But even this silence was enough for Zach. He nodded and walked away. He didn't know if the guard would drink the coffee after his shift or just leave it there. He didn't know if he understood the gesture. But it didn't matter. Zach didn't do it for anyone else. Not for the camera, not for the followers, not for the likes. For the first time in his life, he did something simply because it was the right thing to do. And this time, he didn't feel like a failure. On the contrary. End.